Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
This is the Bloomberg Daybreak podcast, available every morning on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen. It's Wednesday, the 17th of July in London. I'm Caroline Hepker.
And I'm Stephen Carroll. Coming up today, the US Secret Service tightened Donald Trump's security after uncovering intelligence of an Iranian plot to kill him, unrelated to the weekend's assassination attempt.
And Trumponomics Explained. The former president tells Bloomberg Businessweek about his tariff and tax plans.
Plus, Starmer pledges to take the brakes off Britain. Labour's government agenda will be laid out in the King's speech.
Let's start with a roundup of our top stories.
Bloomberg understands that security around former US President Donald Trump was increased by the Secret Service after picking up intelligence in recent weeks of an Iranian plot to assassinate him. As Chris Pitt reports, the threat was separate from the attempt on his life last weekend.
Officials say there is no indication that there's any link to Thomas Matthew Crooks, who's accused of shooting Trump at a rally on Saturday. The threat instead appears to be linked to his previous administration, stemming from the US killing of Qasem Soleimani, the head of Iran's Revolutionary Guard, in 2020. Sources say the White House contacted the Secret Service about the threat, which then conveyed information about the Iranian effort to Trump's campaign. Iran said in a social media post on X that the report of its involvement in a plot against Trump are baseless. In London, Chris Pitt, Bloomberg Radio.
Now, prior to the assassination attempt and shortly before his debate with President Biden, Donald Trump spoke to Bloomberg Businessweek about his economic plans for a second term in office. The Republican presidential nominee waved off Wall Street concerns that he would usher in higher inflation if he wins, and said that he would allow Jerome Powell to serve out his term as the head of the Federal Reserve. Reporter Nancy Cook was one of the Bloomberg journalists who conducted the 90-minute print-only interview, and said that she and her colleagues asked Trump if he wanted to remove Powell from his position.
He said, there's a lot of false information out there. These were his words. And then we asked him if he would allow Jay Powell to serve out the term that Biden appointed him to, which is through 2028. And he said he would allow him to serve. He did add the caveat, as long as I thought he was doing things right. He said he did not think that they should cut interest rates before the election, sort of again implying that if they did, that would be like a political move to sort of help Biden. And also he sort of resisted several questions that we asked him about sort of nudging the Fed or what he would do.
Nancy Cook says that Trump also told her he wants to bring the corporate tax rate to as low as 15% and that he'd even considered Jamie Dimon to head the US Treasury. Now, the full Bloomberg Businessweek interview from Brad Stone and Nancy Cook is available now on the terminal or for subscribers on Bloomberg.com.
The comments from Donald Trump about not wanting rate cuts until after the election come as Wall Street economists have weighed in with the opposite view. Prominent voices, including Goldman Sachs chief economist Jan Hatzius, Queen's College Cambridge president Mohammed El-Arian and Renaissance Macro Research's Neil Dutta are all warning that the Fed is waiting too long to cut, but policymakers, including Governor Adriana Kugler, appear more cautious.
If economic conditions continue to evolve in this favorable manner, with more rapid disinflation, as has been evidenced in the inflation data from the past 3 months, and if employment continues to soften but remains resilient, as has been seen in the last few jobs reports, I anticipate it will be appropriate to begin easing monetary policy later this year.
Kugler is a voting member of the FOMC. Her comments match current market expectations, with investors betting on at least 2 cuts before the end of 2024, starting in September.
Now, the United States has told allies that it is considering using the most severe trade restrictions against companies including Tokyo Electron and ASML if they continue to give China access to advanced semiconductor technology. Bloomberg has learned that the Biden administration is examining the use of the Foreign Direct Product Rule, which would increase controls on items that use even the tiniest amount of American technology. It comes as ASML has reported just this morning morning on second quarter bookings. They came in at 5.57 billion euros. That is a beat on the estimate of 4.41 billion. The Dutch chip equipment maker also announced an interim dividend of €52 per share, and the company says that it still expects an industry recovery to continue into the second half of this year.
HSBC has appointed Georges El-Hedri as its new CEO. He's been with the bank for nearly 2 decades and is currently Chief Financial Officer. El-Hedri will take over in the role from the 2nd of September. Current CEO Noel Quinn announced his retirement from the top job in April.
The UK's new Prime Minister Keir Starmer says that it's time to take the brakes off Britain. It comes as he prepares to lay out his government's agenda in the King's speech later today. Bloomberg's Tiwa Adebayo has the details.
It's a centuries-old tradition. King Charles III will outline a list of bills the new Labour government plans to deliver. Keir Starmer says the laws will lay the foundations for the reform he thinks the country needs and make people better off. The speech includes manifesto pledges like the creation of a state-owned energy company and measures on workers' rights, immigration and the nationalisation of the railways. Sources say some policies of the previous Conservative administration will also feature, such as a progressive smoking ban and boosting renters' rights. In London, Tiwa Adebayo, Bloomberg Radio.
And Elon Musk says the headquarters for X and SpaceX will both relocate to Texas. More from Bloomberg's Charlie Pellet.
The billionaire cites frustration over laws in California, where both companies are currently based. Musk made the announcement on his X social media site. He cited a new law in California, which became the first state to ban school districts from requiring teachers to notify parents about changes to a student's sexual orientation and gender identity. SpaceX's headquarters are currently located in Hawthorne, California, but the company has been building out a large facility in South Texas dubbed Starbase over the last few years. In New York, Charlie Pellet, Bloomberg Radio.
Well, in a moment we'll bring you more on the threat to Donald Trump, plus his interview with Bloomberg Business Week, and look ahead to what to expect from the King's speech here in the UK as well. But first, $24 billion. That's how much has been wiped off the fortunes of the ultra-rich, whose wealth comes from luxury products. Just this year, our colleague Tara Patel in Paris has been crunching the numbers on this. Of course, we've seen demand for luxury goods weaken in some places. That's been a feature of some of the earnings reports we've already had out from this sector. But some of the biggest names, the likes of Bernard Arnault, who built LVMH, he was knocked off the top spot of the Bloomberg Billionaires Index. The heiress of L'Oreal, Françoise Bettencourt-Meyers, also lost her crown earlier this month briefly as the world's wealthiest woman. And the Kering founder, François Pinault, has also seen his fortune halve over the last 3 years to $28 billion.
It's a lovely bit of reporting, but I would just add, hang on, they had a great run in the pandemic, right? You saw the price tag increases on luxury items were immense, sometimes in the kind of double digits. The issue now does seem to be, out of those initial kind of earnings reports, China, the weakness in China, the hesitancy of consumers there. So yeah, they had a good run in the pandemic's what I'd say.
True, and there is still growth in some parts of the world as well, but there's another factor to this as well, and that's the election in France, which hit equities there too, and those 3 French companies in particular being hit as part of that as well. So more details on how the ultra-rich in the luxury sector have been affected by that in that report by Tara Patel. You'll find it on Bloomberg.com and on the terminal.
OK, let's get more now on our top story. The intelligence suggesting an Iranian threat against Donald Trump. This as he's been speaking to Bloomberg about his plans for the US economy. Bloomberg's senior editor Bill Ferries joins us now for more. Good morning, Bill. What do we know exactly about this intelligence about an Iranian plot against Trump?
Right. Thanks for having me. Yes, we're still trying to get some of the details on this, but it seems like in the weeks preceding this last weekend's attempt on Donald Trump's life, that the U.S. intelligence agencies and the White House learned of an Iranian plot against the former president. It was not linked to the shooter involved in this last weekend's plot, but apparently the Secret Service had already boosted some of its measures around Donald Trump to help prevent that kind of an attack. And it's something we've seen a threat against a number of former Trump administration officials. A lot of that tied to the administration's killing of the top Iranian general Qasem Soleimani in early 2020. We know that officials like former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, former National Security Advisor John Bolton, those men all have added security, which is unusual for a former official because of those threats. But this is the first time we've learned about a direct threat against Donald Trump himself.
OK, and of course, this unrelated to what happened over the weekend. And actually, before that assassination attempt, Bloomberg has been speaking to Donald Trump about his plans, particularly for the US economy. Bill, what did we learn about his plans on economic policy?
Well, lots of interesting information coming out of that interview. One was, not a big surprise. Trump was long considered his 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act that lowered corporate and some individual taxes to be like one of the hallmarks of his administration. That is set to expire at the end of 2025. He says he would expand that. He would extend it. He'd also like to see corporate tax rates come down at least a percentage point or two. But some of his most interesting comments may have been on the Federal Reserve. As you guys know, the markets have been pricing in a couple of cuts this year based on the latest information. Donald Trump warned the Fed. He said the Fed should not be making any cuts before the election. He would, I think the interpretation is that he would see that as a political benefit to current President Joe Biden. But he also said that he wouldn't plan to try to oust Fed Chair Jay Powell before the end of his term unless he did something unusual. But, Trump appointed Powell. He soured on him eventually, but he said he would keep him in place at least for the time being.
OK. Briefly, he also did discuss foreign policy in conversation with Bloomberg, his views on tariffs, China and Taiwan.
He's still a big fan of tariffs. He's talked about raising tariffs on all imported goods, 10% or more, raising tariffs even more on China. And on Taiwan, he came out and he said Taiwan had stolen the chip industry from the U.S. He didn't commit to defending the island if it's attacked by China, and that would be a very explicit change in U.S. foreign policy, particularly from the Biden administration. So I think policymakers in Asia will have a lot to think about if Trump goes ahead and continues his lead in this campaign and wins election in November.
OK, Bill Farry is our senior editor. Thanks very much for joining us.
Now to the UK. The Labour government sets out its agenda with some 35 bills expected in the King's speech later today. Economic growth will be the main focus, with plans for legislation on workers' rights, reforming planning regulations, setting up a publicly owned energy company and a border security bill. Joining us now is Bloomberg's UK correspondent Lizzie Burden to take us through all the different things that we're expecting in this King's speech. Good morning, Lizzie.
Morning, Caroline. Yeah, so it sets the narrative for the Starmer government, this. It's really a moment of theatre. I look forward to all the pageantry in UK politics, but it marks the start of the parliamentary year. You'll have the King in the House of Lords delivering the speech. And policy-wise, as you say, the focus will be on economic growth. National renewal will be the framing for these 35 bills that departments will introduce. And so, for example, there'll be a bill to strengthen the Office for Budget Responsibility, the fiscal watchdog. You remember Liz Truss as Prime Minister sidelined the OBR in 2022 to the dismay of the market. So this bill is expected to make sure that that never can happen legally again. There's also going to be a launch of the National Wealth Fund to drive inbound investment. That's been outlined by the Chancellor Rachel Reeves already. And Great British Energy, this publicly owned clean power company. And then there'll be sort of the unfinished business from the Sunak government, the progressive smoking ban, renting reforms. So it, as I say, sets the tone for the new government, but there are likely to be some mini rebellions. Labour MPs laying amendments to the speech, for example, calling for the 2-child benefit cap to be lifted. They argue that it fuels child poverty. The government says there isn't the fiscal room to change the policy yet. And the government would say that this sort of rebellion isn't going to have much impact given the scale of Labour's majority.
OK, and Lizzie, we also get the June inflation data this morning. Could they tempt the Bank of England into an August cut?
Well, economists are expecting a drop from 2% in May to 1.9% in June, so below the Bank of England's 2% target. And this print, you're right, is going to be really closely monitored by the Bank of England. An August rate cut is already on a knife edge in terms of traders' bets right now. So dovish data would give the bank cover for an August cut, which would be a boon, of course, for Keir Starmer. Interestingly, yesterday you saw the 2-year yield falling below 4% for gilts for the first time this year on the expectation that cuts are coming soon. But you'll remember you did have this unexpected strength in the April and May readings, even if inflation is now back at target. And if you look at the recent Bank of England speak from Chief Economist Hugh Pill, he's hinted that he's going to be looking through individual data points at the underlying longer term trends. So that suggests that August really is far from a done deal, and you still could see some volatility in the market off this reading.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, your morning brief on the stories making news from London to Wall Street and beyond.
Look for us on your podcast feed every morning on Apple, Spotify and anywhere else you get your podcasts.
You can also listen live each morning on London DAB Radio, the Bloomberg Business app and Bloomberg.com.
Our flagship New York station is also available on your Amazon Alexa devices. Just say, Alexa, play Bloomberg 1130. I'm Caroline Hepker.
And I'm Stephen Carroll. Join us again tomorrow morning for all the news you need to start your day, right here on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.